thank you, Carlos, for your very inspiring opening remarks. And indeed, the very title of your book, The East is Still Red, and then Chinese Socialism in the 21st Century. And for a Chinese reading this very title, two things catch my eye. One is you have explained, still, as I said, China remains controversial, even among the left in the West. So you try to explain China is still socialist. Now, even this very word, Chinese socialism, within China, this is something amazing. Let me share you the anecdote, because we compiled the book in 2017. Originally, I added this book, 5 scholars, 6 scholars from this institute. We call it the Chinese socialism. Yet, we thought everything goes well. But in the end, the editor from the publishing house in Shanghai said, it must be socialism with Chinese characteristics. But that's the very thing we want to break through. We want to say Chinese socialism. Because when you say socialism with Chinese characteristics, it's for domestic consumption. It's for internal audience, readers. But within the Chinese socialism, by the time 2017, it's already appealing to many other peoples in the world. So this is something, insider story, which many of you did not know. The Chinese, the state has always been very modest. And we don't want to give people the impression that we want to promote Chinese model to outside world. This is entirely only for China, suitable for China, good or bad. But we say, let's do something, original, and we use the title. In the first place, one editor, another editor, all goes well. And then the last one, senior one. So, oh no, this is something entirely new. We must say social with Chinese characteristics. Yet we have a compromise. In the end, we keep most of Chinese socialism within the book. But the very title still with Chinese characteristics. So that's Chinese compromise and flexibility. Yet this idea, Chinese socialism, now is used more and more often within China. Now, following from your conversation, I want to discuss a very interesting idea or my thought on this very issue. Back in 2017, I was invited by the China Forum in Yale University, University of Yale. And I gave a presentation. Then during the Q&A session, one professor asked, Chinese system is a state capitalism. And when you are going to abandon state capitalism? I said, no. Chinese system is socialist. I said, in many ways, Chinese socialism saved American capitalism in the financial tsunami, 2008. And I said, from my own research, another crisis may on the way. I hope next time you'll not come to Chinese socialism. American capitalism, you yourself try to handle the coming crisis.
Yes.
Then I explained 3 reasons why China is socialist state. I said, first, public ownership is predominant. There is an evolution. At the time of beginning of the reforms in the 1980s, this public ownership usually refers to the state-owned enterprises, which is predominant. At that time, foreign direct investment represents less than 5% of China's GDP. By the time of Jiang Zemin, which means 1999, 2000, he made a very important ideological modification. He said, let's go beyond this state-owned enterprises. So at that time, China adopted reform initiatives. It's called the 抓大放小, grasp the big ones and let loose the small ones, which means the big ones, those state-owned enterprises in key sectors, telecommunications, defense industry, and more, are in the hands of the state ownership. But for the others, the small, medium-sized enterprises, they are either privatized or whatever, marketized. So that was. And then there is a change in the government work report, which says public ownership today means not only or not confined to state ownership of means of production or state-owned enterprises, but also refers to the state ownership of land and strategic resources. So when the Western media were talking about the China's debt crisis, government debt, whatever, I said, don't worry, because China's a socialist country. The state, central government has a tremendous reputation and prestige, so you can issue bonds. That's what we're doing today. It's totally different from the American economic system. And the second is there is a balance between political power, social power, and capital power in favor of the most of the Chinese population. This is important. In other words, most Chinese are beneficiaries from the globalization. So China is arguably one of the very few countries, very few complaints about globalization. There are critiques, but not the mainstream views. Because most ordinary people began to improve their living standards in the process of globalization after joining WTO. In other words, we have made best use of whatever liberal Western United States dominated globalization. Yet we've also made best to resist and reduce whatever defects it may have. In Chinese words, it's called the 趋利避害, maximize the good, minimize the bad, something this approach. And so this balance is in favor of most population. And number three, China has the, I call, holistic interest political party, which is the Chinese Communist Party. And this is very different from Western-style political parties, which are partisan parties or partial interest parties. And some people say, well, this is just for the sake of argument. No, it's something very serious because, as I said, China's civilizational state, it is a country, it's an amalgamation of hundreds of states into one of its long history. Yeah, you went to Jiayuguan, at that time, over there it was a state. Shanghai, Zhejiang, Gansu, they all belong to different states in China's long history. Yeah. And then with this amalgamation of hundreds of states into one, China was first unified in 221 BC. And from then on, China was in most of cases, China was always governed by what I call unified ruling entity. And behind the unified ruling entity was a system, what I call meritocracy, or selection plus election. In other words, if you become today a member of political bureau, especially the standing committee, top 7 leaders, you must have already governed, 1, 2, 3 provinces. You have already governed 100 million people before you come to this top echelon of the leadership. It's extremely meritocracy-based, extremely competent, extremely competitive. So I think this is, I said, as a result, China is socialist, not capitalist, not state capitalism. So I just make this additional remark, which I'm pretty sure Carlos will reflect in his new edition of this book. Thank you.